and Walls, Trump and Vance, RFK Jr. Wait, nope. If you can't beat him, join him. As long as he's going to return, right? RFK Jr. is officially out of the presidential race. He suspended his campaign today, say he's pulling his name from about 10 battleground states, and surprise, surprise, he endorsed Donald Trump. Now, how did this happen, you might ask? Well, he says he tried to get Vice President Kamala Harris to talk to him, but he says she refused. Trump, though, heard him out, and in fact floated the potential of a cabinet job for RFK Jr. if he wins. A cabinet job for who? Not the same RFK that you said this about just in May, right?
RFK Jr. is a Democrat plant, a radical left liberal, a big-time taxer. He wants to tax you, an open border advocate. I'd even take Biden over Jr. because our country would last about a year or two longer than it would with Jr. He is not a Republican, so don't think you're going to vote for him and feel good. He's a radical left Democrat.
Okay, so what happened since May, which is when that was, to change all of this? It's not like RFK Jr. underwent any sort of transformation since then. To the contrary, his polling has actually plummeted down to just about 5%. And if anything, his campaign, it got a little stranger, shall we say, once he admitted to dumping a dead bear in Central Park several years ago. I can't make this thing up. But Trump now sees something in him. And so we brought him out tonight at his rally in Glendale, Arizona. RFK's walkout song, My Hero, by the Foo Fighters. Now, can I just, for a second, read those lyrics to you, just some of them? There goes my hero. He's ordinary. Huh. So suddenly, according to Trump, RFK is no longer a dangerous radical. Suddenly, RFK Jr. is an ordinary asset.
I'm very pleased to welcome a man who has been an incredible champion for so many of these values that we all share, and we've shared them for a long time. He's highly respected. He is a great person. He is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal man who loves the people of this country.
There goes my hero since May. But will it work? That's the big question. With me to discuss another twist to this ever-changing race, White House Bureau Chief for the Washington Post, Tolu Olorunnipa, Republican strategist Liam Donovan, and Democratic strategist Amisha Cross, and staff writer for The New Yorker, Claire Malone, who profiled the failed presidential candidate in the article, What Does RFK Jr. Actually Want? Liam, let me begin with you here. So this has been, I'm going to hand out neck braces for Halloween with candy this year because everything changes every single day and you have all these epiphanies, so to speak. And no, I changed my mind about this person. What makes him so different now that Trump would say, yep, I want you, or maybe your voters?
There was a time when he was very useful to Donald Trump. There was a time not that long ago, just 2 months ago, when a quarter of the country didn't like the choice they had before him. 25% of Americans were saying, we don't like either of these major party choices. So what Kennedy represented was a name brand, way station for people that hadn't made their choice yet. And on net, the third-party minor candidates were benefiting Donald Trump. In the two-party share, he had a minor lead, but when you asked the full ballot, it actually benefited him fairly significantly. That all changed in the last 6 weeks, the whiplash that we all have gotten. It's no longer a double hater election, only single digits, actually. Between the assassination and the swap on the Democratic side, people are reasonably happy with their selections, and as such, Kennedy's gone from 20% fading to 15%, and overnight is now down below 5%. In the states that matter, that's more or less in some places. The reason he's doing this in Arizona is because that's the single biggest state where he's taking some of that vote, and it disproportionately helps Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But that is the story of the last 6 weeks.
I mean, Tolu, and first of all, that's the name of the next book, The Story of the Last 6 Weeks. That's what's going on. But let me ask you, if you saw this rally, they actually had fireworks go off when the two shook hands. Now, that's like usually what happens in a love story and the romance is solidified. You've got the fireworks happening. But this was this Trump's way of trying to, after the DNC, the ultimate counter-programming. Usually it's celebratory when you've got a naming of the candidate. Now, an endorsement of a third party and look, seriously, fireworks are going off behind him.
Trump hates not being in the spotlight. He hates the fact that over the past 4 days, Kamala Harris and the Democrats have been winning in the ratings race. They've been capturing the attention of the entire country. They have pulled off a pretty impressive convention in which they were able to rally around Kamala Harris, and her story has become the dominant story in his campaign. And so he wants to change the narrative. We've seen it as he's been doing press conferences, as he's been launching these various attacks that create new headlines, and now as he's welcomed this endorsement from RFK Jr., he is trying to change the narrative. He's trying to shake up the race, and he's trying to win over some of those voters that are Trump light voters who maybe think of themselves as Trump voters, but they were considering maybe going to a third party. Yeah. He's trying to win those voters back because 2%, 3%, 4% in a close race could actually win in some of those battleground states like Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia. If he's able to win over some of those votes, he can potentially change the narrative of the election.
I'm going to call this the one potato, three potato, four strategy. Claire, let me ask you. Listen to how RFK explains why he is now supporting Trump. Listen to this.
We talked about not about the things that separate us because we don't agree on everything, but on the values and the issues that bind us together. And one of the issues that he talked about was having safe food and ending the chronic disease epidemic. Don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
Okay, he said that many of what they believe in does not line up. That's fair. You don't have to be 100% on the same page, but there's a lot that separates the two of them, in my understanding. What is drawing RFK to Trump? Is it the not healthy food, but the carrot of maybe a cabinet position?
I think it's a few things. I definitely think the sort of tantalizing, could I get a cabinet position? Could I chair some prominent panel is there? But I'd also say that Kennedy's campaign had an interesting culture of, he actually disagreed with a lot of people who were campaign staffers or senior advisors. The campaign had a sort of fracas over what was RFK's actual stance on abortion. So I actually think he's sort of comfortable with the gray areas. And part of his pitch throughout, the past year or so has been, we're really talking about existential issues like chronic disease. We're not here to divide you with, frankly, the major issues of the election, things like immigration, or abortion rights. So he is, I think, a little bit comfortable both with the gray areas of disagreeing with someone, I guess, including his wife, Cheryl Hines, I think is not supportive of this Trump endorsement. But Bobby Kennedy is also, he also loves the spotlight, just like Trump. So I think that's also an attraction for him.
Well, Misha, the Harris campaign released a statement about RFK's decision, saying, quote, "For any American out there who is tired of Donald Trump and looking for a new way forward, ours is a campaign for you." So how do they thread this needle between, on the one hand, attacking Trump, on the other hand, not trying to alienate RFK supporters and saying, no, you don't want that side. If you don't want to vote for him, it's this ticket that you want?
I think you connect Trump to RFK because there isn't that much daylight between them. We're talking about two people who are anti-vaxxers, two people who are anti-science, two people who have stood by policies that do not protect a woman's right to choose. We know that when RFK Jr. was actually still in this race, his vice presidential candidate, Shanahan, is starkly against IVF. She's someone who talked about a pseudoscience where women in their 50s could basically get more sunlight and somehow that would help them conceive. These are people who are beyond weird. These are people who also have very dangerous policy positions. RFK believes that if you have a vaccine, if your children get vaccines, they're going to be autistic. My older brother has autism, and I'm very offended by people who are pushing these anti-science narratives and, quite frankly, scaring the hell out of folks and passing along much diseases and other things that we had eradicated decades ago because they refused to actually follow doctors' advice and continue to go against them. I think that they thread the needle by saying exactly who RFK Jr. is, whom his own family has roundly come out and rebuked for some of the stances that he's taken, and linking that directly to what we've seen from Donald Trump. Again, there's a reason why there are people who supported Donald Trump who also supported RFK Jr. Those were the people that he was peeling off initially because they are two sides of the same coin.
Well, Liam, I want to bring you back into this point because Trump, speaking of reproductive rights, he takes credit, as you know, for ending Roe v. Wade and getting the Supreme Court justices on the bench to be able to position them to do so. He also posted on social that he'd be great for women and reproductive rights. And then he added to that tonight saying that the Republican Party is a, quote, leader on IVF. Really?
Well, so I think this goes back to the clips you were showing of him saying what he needed to say about RFK. At any given point in time, Donald Trump is more than willing to say to that audience whatever works for that situation. So, I think
But
that
if you
will
see
be.
that, I don't want to cut you off, really finish, but if you see that, and that's the idea of almost being a ideological chameleon, whatever you want to hear, I'll tell you. What do you want my name to be, right? If you see that as a strategist, doesn't a voter see that and think, no?
I think they will at some level, and in a weird way, that was an appeal, like not in this context, but you have to think back to 2016. Part of the reason that Donald Trump read as the moderate candidate in some ways to some voters was because they kind of understand that politicians are kind of full of it in a lot of places, and he'll at least say, or be nakedly transactional about it. But I think I just wanted to make a point that Misha laid out a lot of things I think we'll hear, but I think there's a reason why you had the Harris campaign lay out not try to antagonize these voters and to leave it to the surrogates to say all the nasty things about RFK, because there are spaces, not on CNN, not necessarily in print media or otherwise, but there are spaces that there are key voters that are going to decide this election who actually do care what RFK says, and the fact that he's supporting Donald Trump and will not be in the way of Donald Trump, I think is important. It's marginal, it's not a huge thing, but I think they do have to be careful, and as you said, there is a needle to be threaded there. They have to be careful not to antagonize people who are gettable for them and push them into Trump's arms.
Okay, I want to go to you on that point, Amisha. Get back to you, Tulum, just 1 second, because the Democrats seem to inherently understand the need to talk about reproductive rights at the DNC. It was a huge part of the conversation. They spent a lot of time actually hammering Trump over abortion. How effective do you think that's actually been, not only last week or this week, but going forward?
I think it's extremely effective because we know of a handful of states that actually have ballot initiatives to further restrict women's reproductive rights. Those ballot initiatives will come up in time for the November election. But we also know that over 54% of the voting electorate is women. And we've seen that women have been galvanized, regardless of what side of the aisle they subscribe to. They've been galvanized around women's reproductive rights, access, and choice. Women want to be able to make those decisions for themselves between them, whomever their partner is, and their good Lord. At this point, there is a pressure from conservatives to have government intervene in something that has for a very long time been fought for women in privacy rights. And I think that in as much as the Democrats can continue to carry that mantle, can continue to talk to women across multiple demographics about why they need to stand forward, in addition to bringing in men, there are several men-led organizations, Men for Choice being one of them, that is laying out the advocacy points for men as to how this affects their lives as well. We can't talk about the economy. We can't talk about women's roles in it without also talking about them and family planning. Birth control and access to birth control options are a huge part of women's reproductive rights. And the Republican Party has decided that they are going to fight this war on women no matter what. And I think that the Democrats are smart to keep pressing go in advocacy against them.
Tolu, let me give you the last word on this, because we've come from a week where it began with President Biden and a bit of a swan song and people being very deferential and the thank you, Joe, to culminating in the official torch being passed to now official nominee Harris. That is quite the bubble to be in the DNC and to hear all the support. You got to take that out, to Liam's point, to the rest of the country to get to that 270. When you look ahead at the impact of now RFK endorsing Trump, what do you think is really going to move the needle for those voters who are looking to be persuaded? Is it endorsement? Is it more granular detail on the issues? Or are we continuing on the personality train?
I think it's going to be a little bit of all of the above. We saw during the DNC, we saw a lot of euphoria, a lot of happiness within the halls of the United Center. But we also heard from a number of people on stage saying it's not always going to feel like this over the next 74 days. There are going to be moments where we have to work really hard because times are tough. We're going to have to win over some of these voters who are still skeptical, because the feeling of euphoria within that United Center is not what's happening across the country. People are saying that the country's on the wrong track. People are saying that they need to know more about Kamala Harris, need to know more about how she's going to affect their lives. And so there's going to be much more work that Democrats have to do to showcase that they actually will impact people's lives in a positive way.
Well, the phrase that was used was underdog. They seem to implicitly know that as well. Stand by, everyone.